All right. Judge, since you're our co-chair, would you want me to share the agenda with everybody?
Does everybody have a copy of the agenda? If you
Okay.
do not, if you don't have a copy, right? I think everybody's got one.
Okay.
Right? Okay. I'll just start off that I'm gonna turn it over to our star of stage and screen, Dr. Bitzer. Alrighty. I'll just start out. My name's Anna Mills Wagner. I live here in Salisbury, and my only expertise related to elections is that I've run elections, and that's all I've done. And was fortunate to win. So this is all sort of new to me. We just want to go around the room or the screen. Julie, you want to go next and say who you are and what your expertise is?
Sure, it'll be quick because I'll just ditto what you just said, Your Honor. I'm Julie Eiselt. I'm in Charlotte. I ran for Charlotte City Council 3 times and served as the mayor pro tem for the last 5 years, and that's my experience with it. So,
good. Amar, you're next, I think.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Omar Lugo. I'm originally from Venezuela. If everybody's familiar with the Venezuelan case, my only expertise is seeing how a corrupt government actually steals elections and makes it legally. Be that as it may, I'm here just to listen and be able to add anything possible to this process.
Thank you. All right, Josh Lawson.
Yeah, thanks, Judge. I'm Josh Lawson. I work at the Aspen Institute advising on AI and democracy issues. Previously was head of electoral and emerging risk at Meta, just the Facebook family of apps and services. But probably most relevant to this group is that I was the general counsel for the State Board of Elections for about 5 years, between 14 and 19. But that's about it. Kick it back to you, Judge.
Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, I am Sarah Levere. I am a county elections director in Brunswick County, North Carolina. I have been in county election administration for almost 18 years. I am currently the president of our Election Directors Association, and I'm excited to learn and share what I know. And I'm very excited to see Josh Lawson in the group because he is very, very intelligent when it comes to election law. So this is going to be good.
Good.
Sarah.
Good. I guess is there anybody that picture's not on the screen that's here?
Ryan is here. I don't know if he can. He's on his phone as well. Ryan Davolt, can you hear us and just briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, sir. Hey, Dr. Bitzer. I just left a meeting, so I'm sorry I'm going to be traveling here. Ryan Davolt, I have actually one of Dr. Bitzer's proteges, or whatever you want to call it. He was my advisor and my mentor for 4 years while I was at Catawba. But for the past 12 years, I have also served my hometown as a city council member, being the youngest person ever elected here. And I also worked for the University of North Carolina here in Kannapolis. So I'm glad to be a part of y'all's group and enjoy our time together.
Great, thanks.
And
I
then,
think what I'm going to do next is do you want to speak, Dr. Bitzer?
I was just going to introduce Rachel. She had popped up, but want to give her a chance to
Sure.
introduce.
Hi there. I'm Rachel Capon. I am the state coordinator, helping out with with Bob and Jennifer at the Carter Center. So I am here as a resource for anything that you all need. I'll just kind of be lurking in the background, taking notes, and then I will follow up after this call with all of the notes that I've taken. And then we will be recording this meeting as well, and we'll upload that so you all can review it as well. So happy to be a part of this, excited to see what conversations kind of are born from this meeting, and looking forward to seeing the future.
Thank you. Dr. Bitzer, you want to
Yeah.
You may-
Yep. I'm Michael Bitzer. I'm professor of politics and history here at Catawba. I'm on the steering committee for the Elections Commission. And as each member of the steering committee is on two different working groups, we're describing ourselves as coaches, resources, facilitators to help this group kind of focus on the issue of counting votes. So we certainly don't want to lead. We want y'all to put in your input and what questions you have. I think with the ultimate goal of getting towards drafting a short document that would be part of the final full report about this particular topic and what we have found in terms of the research, and what questions, what issues might North Carolinians in general think about when it comes to this particular topic of counting votes. So I'm here to help serve as a resource, and certainly willing to, along with Rachel, help in whatever facilitation I can do. Just to give you a sense, the other committee that will be meeting tomorrow that I'm on is in regards to mail-in ballots. And I think that there are going to be some crossover between a lot of these working groups, but we can, kind of carve out our territory. If there's overlap with the mail-in group, I can certainly help to facilitate that interchange between the two.
Thank you. I just have one question. I think I've asked you this before, Coach Bitzer. This report that we're going to come up with, formulate, where does it go? Who sees it?
It will be available to the entire public. It will be basically addressed to the citizens of North Carolina. Certainly, we will make a very big media splash, we hope, with this final report. It will come out after the November 2024 elections, just because of the timing of this particular group. But I think we need to be thinking about how can we help educate the public. Are there a lot of questions about this general topic that we're going to be covering within this group, as all groups are going to be covering? And then if we find that there are some areas of improvement, perhaps some areas of change to perhaps consider in all of this, I think that that will be a component of what the full commission will be wrestling with in terms of the adoption of this. But the way that we're kind of looking at this is we want to get the best information about this particular topic out to the public so that they have a basis by which they can ground themselves on understanding the integrity of fair, safe, and secure elections for North Carolina.
Okay. And thank you. And I think Stephen Duncan's just joined us.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear us? You just want to give a brief introduction of yourself, please.
I apologize for being late. I had a list of errands to complete this morning so I could start my journey to Troy, Alabama, where I'll be with friends enjoying an Appalachian State Sunbelt Championship game, something not even considered 5 weeks ago. But anyway, I've been involved.
It's a game
in,
tonight or tomorrow?
elections.
It's the game tonight.
It's actually tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
It's tomorrow afternoon, 4 o'clock ESPN Eastern time.
That's great.
But I served on the Buncombe County Board of Elections. I have moved to Rutherford County since, and that's why I came off the board. Been involved in politics, one thing or another, and public policy for a long time. When I did graduate from App with a master's in town, county, and city government. So I've been involved, but my real job is real estate, and I love that very much. So I look forward to working with you and learning, as well as I can have some very big opinions based on what I observed in 2018 and 2020, and I look forward to sharing that.
Great. Thank you, and good luck tomorrow. All righty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Dr. Bitzer, if it's all right with everybody, I thought we would just sort of let him go to these possible topics to be researched and see if anybody has any ideas of how we should approach that. All right, so it's up to you. You're on.
Okay. Sure. And this list was created through kind of the mind meld of the steering committee made up of Jennifer Roberts, Bob Orr, Chris Cooper, Martha Croft, and myself, along with Rachel. And this is not exhaustive, nor is this complete. We were thinking about, with each subgroup, what specific topics each group would kind of tackle and handle. And so these 6 topics that we've come up with are very preliminary. If we want to focus on 1 or 2 in particularly, that is up to this group. It is very much an organic working group. And that's kind of the way that we're approaching it with all the subcommittees. Certainly the issue of early votes versus mail-in ballots versus election day votes, just to kind of give folks a sense of what North Carolinians do in terms of their voting method. Generally, when it comes to particularly presidential years, but now much more with midterm years, most of the ballots will come before election day, typically in what is called one-stop or in-person early ballots. The vast bulk of those ballots will be cast before election day. Typically, we tend to have around maybe 2, maybe 3% of the ballots come by mail, and then the rest certainly on election day. But the differences in terms of how those ballots are dealt with could be something that this group could look into. The issue of once the ballots are received, the hand-eye counts versus tabulators, the security in those systems of how to actually look at the ballots when they are received, and then what is known as the chain of custody, where the ballots are deposited, how are they secured in terms of getting to the final point of tabulation. The issue of provisional ballots. If somebody is out of precinct or some other issue arises, the casting of those ballots, but then the resolution, the adjudication of them. The issue of retrievable ballots. How do we ensure that if in some point past the election, we need to confirm that ballots were actually cast legally? How is that process done? And then we sent out the copy of the general statute and the particular article that deals with a lot of these issues in state law. And we thought that that would be a good place for each of the groups to kind of ground themselves. We know that for the most part, most folks are not attorneys. Josh certainly is and has, real experience in this. So I would value his input into this as well, but just being grounded on what the law says and perhaps maybe what the law doesn't say. That could be an issue of within any of these topics that perhaps this group needs to think about. So with that very brief overview, I'll certainly open it up to any questions, concerns, things that I could answer to the best of my ability. Perhaps Josh could weigh in from his experience as well.
I have a question because I think there's some misconception about early votes. When are early votes counted? Some people think that if you vote early, it's automatically going to be counted before election day, but nobody knows it. Josh?
Sarah, I feel like you should give us the lowdown on what really happens out there.
So one-stop early votes, those are not tabulated and counted until election day. So they are cast in the early voting locations. The ballots are removed and secured each night, brought back to the county board office, I think for most counties. But it's not until election day during a board meeting at 5:00 p.m. that the board members actually close those machines and pull the results and start working to get that information ready to release when the polls close.
Okay.
So it's not at all possible that we know what the results are during early voting. I do think that is probably a common misconception.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a misconception because absentee votes seem to be reported before any of that, the people who voted on election day are, and so that this might be something we want to think about clarifying it with the public.
It might be, and it's because we meet at 5:00 PM with the
Yep.
board and we tabulate all of the early absentee votes and the early one-stop in-person votes to have that all ready. So as soon as the polls close, that's all ready to be released.
Okay.
And we don't release it to the public. Our board members would know what the results are as part of that 5 PM meeting, and the staff
Sure.
that needs to know. But, you know, if we have members of the public at our board offices, they aren't even seeing those results until the polls are closed.
And I think that those kinds of issues and misconceptions are certainly something that we would want to address. Stephen, you had your hand raised.
Yes, well, from what we did in our procedure in Buncombe County, and I could see where there could be a misunderstanding. You know, we have piles and piles at the last election of mailed-in ballots, and we open them, review them, make sure that they had at least the minimum qualifications to be counted. They do stick them in a machine. They do run them through. Now, all we actually saw was, you know, we had 3,800 ballots come in, and we had 38 ballots that were counted in the machine, but we are not aware of what those tabulations are. But I do see that there are people that are sitting in front of us and during the last election that watched every heartbeat of our meeting on video that clearly believe that when they went into the back room with those machines, I guess they think they flashed us the numbers from the back of the room. But I can see where that procedure could be easily misinterpreted and be believed that we are given information that is privy and not public.
Yep.
Great points. Omar.
Yes, for Sarah and Josh, and or Josh, can you guys briefly walk me through the process of counting the actual votes on the election date?
Sarah?
Jared? Yeah, do you want?
So counting the votes is really tabulating, and that is really a computer crunching the data. It's not us physically, you know, vote for Joe Biden or vote for Donald Trump. It is a machine tabulating those things from secure, some kind of media, depending on the voting system that each county has. That tabulation is done starting at 5 PM for most counties. Some counties can by resolution meet earlier, but it's done in the presence of the bipartisan board on a computer that works with our voting system that is not connected to the internet. It is a standalone system. All of the results are tabulated on that standalone computer and then transferred to a public-facing computer. So it really is an electronic process. It's not us physically touching each ballot, if that makes sense. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm asking. Thank you. And at any point, has any has it has been can I ask this in English? Has it been a chance or an opportunity to educate the public on how this process actually goes through?
So I can tell you that we try to educate the public on these processes, but the public doesn't really pay attention, unfortunately. And so I'm really excited about the work that this committee is going to do. I know here in Brunswick County, we live stream every one of those meetings. We invite people to come watch the work that we do because we are doing all of this under the supervision of the board. It's a public process. Anyone can come watch. Sadly, people just don't care. You know, they hear what they hear and they think what they think. But yeah, I'm all about let's educate. Let's show them what we do.
Oh, shit. Let me just go back. Or it's not entertaining enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's really not.
Well, for those of us who are election geeks, it's pretty entertaining, but you know, they're rare amongst the crowd. Josh, did you have anything to add in from your perspective to answer Omar's question?
Just a quick comment and then kind of a question actually back to the coaches. I think that there is opportunity, even in your question, to kind of guess at what the public might need to know. Counting, tabulation is one set of counting. And then what the public probably thinks of is, when do we know results? Right? And that's a certification process that involves a lot more than what can go in the tabulator. Set of decisions that are made on provisional ballots that were cast but with some deficiency. There's opportunities to cure some of those deficiencies. There's research and deliberations that have to happen on a bipartisan basis. And that happens over a series of weeks before certification actually occurs. And so I think that there may be opportunity for this subcommittee to in what we put out, to say, okay, you know, everybody thinks of counting votes. What is counting votes? Counting votes is tabulating certain types of votes, making decisions on other types of votes, and then finally certifying that these total results are credible and fed back to either the state or, if it is the state, that becomes the final certification for certain races. But then the question back to kind of the chairs, coaches, what's our work back? So if our final product is some kind of written thing, when is that coming out so that we can kind of schedule how we tackle this thing?
Yeah, great question. And what we're proposing is, so the final product would be released in December of 2024. We recognize that with the intensity of the election that fall, the likelihood is we would need to spend from August to November having the finalized products from all the committees pulled together, consistency in terms of structures of each of the groups' reports. The steering committee, the steering group, would be doing that work. What this group we would hope to be able to have as an in-draft product would be by August, our set of findings, any recommendations, what we are basically going to propose as our work product. And before August, we are hoping in the middle of the summer, mid to maybe late June, around July 1, having the full commission come back together and at least hear drafts from each of the working groups. We're still kind of thinking about that and finalizing it, but that's kind of the major first targeted product to be produced would be by the middle of the summer. So then we could take any questions, any concerns from the other commissioner members about this report, work on it over July into August, and then submit our final document. Before that, we are thinking January to the end of May would be kind of the work time that this group would be engaged with. And we're thinking maybe a meeting a month, or maybe a meeting every other month. And we've got that on the agenda for the meeting schedule for 2024. But we envision kind of each working group having those first 5 months to really kind of gather the data, gather the information, think about the structure of how we want to present this. I think just these two questions alone are really good basic information that if we are looking at this as a public education initiative, these are things that the public needs to understand. Because I think for so many voters, they walk in, they cast their ballot, they leave. They didn't think anything of it until they want to know what the results are. And I think having this kind of clarification of the processes for this group in particular is going to be critically important for public information. So with this initial meeting, what we're hoping to be able to do a little bit later in the agenda is try and maybe start setting some dates, thinking about what we want to accomplish during those debate dates, and gear towards the end of May being a kind of rough draft formal product produced so that we can submit it to the other commissioner members and then be ready for the midsummer review. that help address that question, Josh?
That's really helpful. Can you speak at all to the rationale of putting it out, weeks after the election instead of before it?
Yeah, and we went back and forth with this on the steering committee. If we wanted to try and get this before the general campaign, usually starting on Labor Day, really gets in earnest with the intensity of what we're all expecting North Carolina to be in, with presidential election, gubernatorial election, various, Council of State contests that are probably going to be very intense, congressional elections, local elections. We weren't sure if we would be able to necessarily break through a lot of the noise of what we're expecting the campaign to be. What we can certainly plan to do is, if issues arise during August, September to November's general election, and if we have draft documents, we can at least present those as some of the initial findings of what this commission is looking into addresses these issues, to try and help with information, but more importantly, to try and deal with disinformation or misinformation. I think the intentionality of waiting until after the general election was, if we are proposing any policy recommendations in particularly, that probably needs to be consideration after the general election, just because of everything else going on.
I was just thinking, Michael, it might, even though we will not come out with any recommendations or our report until after the general election, I mean, perhaps it would be an opportunity for us to have some public forums before then, when things start getting noisy and people start getting crazy, to find out what their concerns are, and maybe we could explain some things at a public forum that would ease some people's, I mean, it's just this is sort of, obviously I live in Salisbury. We have lots of different kind of folks in Salisbury, but we had some workmen here at our house over the last week, and I said something about elections. He said, well, I never vote. Doesn't make any difference anyway. They have already decided who's going to win. So many people think that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible to me, and
Yeah.
it's sad. I thought, well, you've got to vote, but nah, it's rigged. It's not going to make any difference. But that's just a big, unfortunate. I mean, particularly among sometimes less educated folks. And I don't know what we do about that.
Yeah, and I think, and you raise, I think, a critical point, because in those first 5 months, two things are going to be happening. One is, we could certainly do a public style town hall that, again, would be recorded, placed onto the website, and give, some experts in this particular area the opportunity to present their research, their findings, but also for the public to engage with us, with this particular committee. What kind of questions do folks have? And we could use that public input to also craft responses, address concerns, address issues. The other major thing is, we've got the March primary, and that will kind of be almost a, preliminary test case for us to listen and to hear, okay, are there concerns about counting the votes coming out of the primary election? Are there issues that we need to think about in the back half of our work period time that we could potentially utilize that kind of response as well? So again, this is kind of very broad open. One thing that, and I'll get to Josh and to Omar here in just a minute. One thing that we've been in contact with several polling outfits, particularly at institutions of higher education in the state, is, would they be willing to put some questions on some polls that they're going to be running? And I think if there are some general areas that this group would like to know, what is the public's opinion about the processes? How knowledgeable are they? Do they understand what a provisional ballot is? Those kinds of things. We could craft some generalized questions handed over to these pollsters, and they could run those in some of their polling and see if, you know, what the current state of public opinion is about the counting of ballots. So with that, we'll go with Josh, Omar, and then Julie.
Just a fast thing, and then I'll shut up for purposes of note taking. I think that what I'm hearing probably would advise towards us intentionally writing what we produce in two kind of blocks across all of the different work streams. One is the explainer sections, and then one is the advocacy side. Because if we do, Dr. Bitzer, have to pump out something that does explain something that's top of mind for the journalist, et cetera, so they don't repeat misinformation and have the best resources, it would be nice to be able to rip those out from all of the different kind of groups quickly without having to kind of take out little sentences here and there where we're making recommendations, just intentionally block it separately.
I think that's a great way to think about it. Definitely. Yeah. Omar.
Yes. My question is more going back to the subject of the early voting. So I don't know if Julie would like to go before me, so I can ask my question and go back to the subject. I'm sorry, Dr. Bitzer.
Sure.
Yeah,
No.
just call him Coach. It's easier.
Okay, Julie, I'll go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, mine's not very long. I think, you know, as I've mentioned to people that I've joined this commission, I feel very honored to be a part of it because I think it's important work. People's reactions are, oh, we really need that. And I'm not sure they even know why. And so I think even as, you know, we progress closer and closer to the primaries and the election, just having information out there that this is happening and that it's taking place, I think would be really valuable and give people some degree of comfort that there is an organization out there and there are people out there who do watch it and do put out information should they want it. Maybe they don't want it, but, you know, because nobody's ever said, tell me more. They just say, oh, it's so important, you know, so without even knowing what the scope of the work is. But even through organizations like the League of Women Voters or groups that somebody might naturally think, well, that's where I'm going to go to look for such information. You know, any progress that we can put out there leading up to the election, I think would be helpful in terms of building trust.
That's a great point, and I'll certainly bring it up with the steering committee and see what their reaction is. I think the public information aspect is going to be crucial and critical, and maybe we as the steering committee and ultimately the commission need to rethink, can we just put the basic information that we'll have in the final report out there for the public as a service to kind of be consolidated on the website, provide the information, and folks know where they can turn to. So
if I could just add one more thing, even to think about having a live resource that people can access with information like you gave us as the attachments to get ready for this meeting. I hear a lot of, for example, a lot of people don't know that the public can't get a referendum on the ballot. Everyone said, well, we need to do what they did in this state or that state. And so just information like that, I think if it's there, I don't know where to tell people to go. They usually just ask other elected officials, and we don't always know that. But, you know, even just to have a live website or something that has resources to answer those kinds of questions or FAQs would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Omar's hand's still up.
Sure. To add to that, I would like to suggest making out of all this information that is sometimes it's so intricate and difficult to understand, to create infographics and make it simple for the public to, you know, navigate all this information. So, Dr. Bitzer, this question is more related to the history of our voting process. at any point in our history, was there a time where early voting results were announced as they were coming in? And if so, what were the results of that?
So you're asking, was there a consistent point in time when all the results were known, or is there, or has it been
Yeah.
staggered throughout time?
Like in very simple words. So there was an election, an election season, and people started coming in and voting early. And as they were voting, all these votes were being announced, to the public. Was there something like that in our history?
No, generally it tends to, the results are released when the polls close, and we have to recognize that every major election is conducted within each state's parameters as to different rules that apply to that state. For example, here in North Carolina, the polls, will close at 7:30. If I'm not mistaken, Sarah, I think that's right. In some states, they close earlier. In other states, it's later. When California votes, they're getting results from the East Coast. So the process of not just election administration, but the election reporting and the results are 50 different systems within
Oh, wow. Okay.
the states. And so an important thing to consider in all of this is, yes, we have these federal elections. We're going to be electing a president, but we're doing it within 50 different systems of administering elections and all the components wrapped into it. So, back, before, the Civil War, it would take typically weeks before folks knew what the ultimate results were, because they would have to travel by horse, by cart to the state capitol to ultimately be reported.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe if I could ask, maybe Sarah would be the one that would know the answer to this best. If I'm correct, I believe we're a big military state, obviously North Carolina. And if you're overseas and you vote, when are those votes counted? I mean, can't they be counted up until 2 weeks after the election day, or am I wrong?
So it depends on when we receive that voter's ballot. If we receive it by 5 p.m. the day before the election, those results are released with the election night results.
Okay.
Any that come in after that, I believe that those voters, and Josh probably knows this better than me, it's 5 p.m. the day before the canvass, and canvass is 10 days after the election. So okay. I think when we talk about the results and things being released early, I think that's a very good point to raise when we start educating people. What comes out election night is not final.
Yeah, see, nothing. Yep.
Election night, campaigns and the media call elections. Yep. Boards of elections do not call elections.
Yeah.
What comes out election night is not final. And another point I think is that when people start hearing on the news, like so-and-so's ahead and in the polls, those are polls. Those are not actually how people voted. And I think that really causes some confusion for people that don't understand the difference.
Yeah.
And I think that is a critical component of what this group probably needs to address in some way, shape, or form in that regard. I know we've got about 20 minutes left, and we've got a couple other major points. I think as you're thinking about this, certainly feel free to email myself, to email Rachel, to email the entire group. As you're thinking about these topics and these issues, what other questions, what other concerns do you hear out there? In talking to friends and talking to colleagues, try and get the word of mouth input from the man, woman on the street to give us a sense of what we should be thinking about, because I think these kinds of things are, critically important. If somebody's thinking about it, there is likely out of the 10.5 million North Carolinians, somebody else is thinking the exact same thing. So anything that we can get, further input on and thoughts about any of these topics will certainly benefit this group. With that said, if we could think about the meeting schedule, again, thinking about a draft report to be completed by June 30th, and how we want to handle, thinking about the kinds of meetings that we want to do. Do we want to have a public input session where we receive questions from the public? We talk through these questions, perhaps then finalize some experts that could then come and Zoom with us to kind of address these areas. Certainly open to thoughts from the group as to, do we want a meeting on each of these, particularly 5 topics? I mean, that one in of itself would cover us for the entire 5-month period of what we're thinking about.
And is 1 hour sufficient time for us to really, that's what I'm worried about, but
Yeah. Sure.
if we need more time. Well, I think we do need public input, and I don't know if the steering committee has done any publicity. I think sometimes people would much rather come up to me personally and ask me tell me about a concern they have instead of being at a town hall with people they don't know. I'm thinking if people know that this is going on through newspapers or whatever, and say who the members are or contact person, we might get input that we would not get in a town hall, perhaps.
Sure. And one thought that we had utilizing the website that we've got is each area, each working group would basically potentially have its own, page, and that maybe we could include a public comment, that somebody could type in, I've got some questions about, why we don't call races on election night. And get the input that way through it. And that would allow us to kind of screen things as well. Josh.
It's just a suggestion that, my suggestion, if we do a public comment thing or an event, is that we have something ahead of time that at least lays out what we think we would need to be covering, just because people's questions, they're real questions, the most salient questions, but then too, it's better to be like, hey, the sky is blue and the sun rises in the east. What else do you need to know? As opposed to, what do you have questions about the sky, right? Just because I think that we could narrow in our focus a little bit. So building that into the roadmap time cycle, that we have something that we can throw out there to people and then they can react to it, as opposed to like relying on them to drive our focus.
Okay. So basically give some foundational information about each of these topics, and then say, all right, what other questions based on what we know, what other questions would you have?
What do you not get out of this?
Okay.
Yet?
Yep.
Hey, Bitzer.
Yes.
Sorry, I can't find my hand icon on this phone, and I'm in the middle of dealing with a sewer backup at a student property. So that's it's very fitting that we're talking about elections and sewer, but no, I was just going to mention, I do like the public education section of that, because, for example, my father-in-law, this past election, he lives in Harrisburg, which is in Cabarrus County, almost to the Charlotte line. He went to vote, and he's not a voting guru by any stretch of the imagination, but he went to vote, and when he walked in, showed him his ID, they told him at the precinct that he had already voted. And of course, that would be the last thing in his mind, would be to go early vote. And they told him that he needed to fill out a provisional ballot if but he didn't have time to do it, but he didn't understand what any of that meant. And
Yep.
he's been in contact with the elections chair board, and I know all those people, and she said it was a precinct members era that happened, but all that's important for people to know, like, what does that mean if you do a provisional ballot?
Yep.
And how does that all function? And so, and I'm not sure if that's part of this committee or it could be another committee's responsibility for the provisional ballot process or all that, but just wanted to mention that. I think that's just an example of a honest thing that happened, and we need to be prepared to help navigate people through
Yeah.
that.
I agree, because I think for sure provisional ballots are part of what we're doing, because
It is.
whether or not they get counted is a big deal.
Yes, yes. Provisional ballots and their adjudication, their resolution is within this jurisdiction, this wheelhouse of this committee. So we have that as a topic. Yes.
And I'm sure possibly one of the other committees is looking at precinct officials, how they're trained,
Yes.
to navigate potential mistakes like that, or whatever, because all that's just as important as the actual ballot process.
Yes, yes. There is another group that's dealing with that. Do we want to, based on what Josh thought about, do we want to schedule kind of a first meeting just to review basic information, documentation of these various topics, pulling, relevant information together, and maybe just segmenting them into these 5 topics, and then maybe that serves as kind of the basis of not just the foundational information, but can help build us towards the end product of here's the basic information, and then we can post that and see where public comments, public questions might come out of that particular dynamic.
Sure, and I think Omar's point may be, to make it as simple as we can using diagrams or graphics or something like that people could look at, because reading, no offense to Josh, you didn't write this stuff, but reading chapter 16 will make your eyes glaze over in 5 seconds. It's horrible. Okay.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. What I know, until probably January 5th or so, folks are committed to various holidays and activities. Is there a particular work week day that might be convenient for us to go ahead and schedule a first and second meeting to go ahead and get on people's calendars?
Does it depend on your class schedule?
So probably yes. My schedule has been lightened considerably. I'm only teaching 2 classes next spring, and it's basically from noon until 3 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays I've got devoted to other things, but this is one of the major initiatives that I'm kind of holding those 3 days for availability to y'all.
What do y'all think about Wednesdays? I just think Friday could be bad since it could be a travel aid, but
yeah, Fridays are a lot of times bad for me. Wednesdays is usually pretty good for me personally.
Okay. Forget that idea. Okay.
Could we not have them do one of those online suggested day polls so we can all submit kind of how we came up with this meeting? It seems like that would be easier than
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll put out, I'll work with Rachel, and we can put out a poll that y'all can kind of submit based on your calendars. For what I'd probably like to do is go ahead and at least get January and February maybe on everybody's books, And then
Sure.
in January, we can look at March, maybe just do 2 months out
Yeah.
for folks to consider in terms of that. But yeah, if folks are comfortable with that, we'll work on Google date calendar.
Because did Rachel get a pretty good response from the other committee she did that with? Where's Rachel?
I'll defer to Rachel.
Yeah, so I would say that we got a really good response with that.
Okay.
One of the other committees, and I believe Stephen Duncan might be on it as well. We sent out a Google form at the end of it to kind of determine what days would work. And we established like a running Thursday. And so we kind of just selected the 4 Thursdays in that month. And so we can do that if you want. That might be an easier option for us to just figure out what Thursdays work. And if there's a specific time you guys want to work with, or if you just want to do a doodle poll, we can do that as well. I'm happy to do either or both. But yeah, we've had a pretty good response with it. I will say that when I send it out, we'll get a few people to respond, and then it usually works well to have somebody else follow up with it, maybe a few days later, just to ensure. Sometimes it's gone to spam folders and sometimes it's just fallen off people's radars. So it would be good to have kind of a follow-up email if possible.
And I can certainly help with that as well. Yeah. Okay. I guess the fourth section here, things to think about before our first 2024 meeting. Again, what kind of questions, what kind of thinking about these topics might you want to see addressed about administering elections? And then if you have specific areas, you know, this is a burgeoning area, particularly in political science, of research on election administration, but it's still a fairly young and growing field in the discipline. But if you think, you know, we need to hear from somebody who understands, you know, provisional ballots, or, you know, the tabulation, you know, processes that are done across various states, to give us a grounding of in terms of comparison and contrast. Maybe be thinking about that through the holidays, and we'll reach back out to folks, you know, right after the new year before we schedule the first meeting, and just kind of get what kind of questions do y'all want to see about these various topics.
Okay, so do you think, so our next meeting, Mike, we're probably going to go, I think it was Josh's suggestion, each meeting will have one of these 5 topics or 4 topics, or what do you, yeah, will be devoted. The first meeting will be devoted early votes versus mail-in ballots versus election day, and then, or what?
Yeah, we could do it that way, or we could take the approach of, you know, trying to get as much foundational information about all of these.
Okay.
Have that, you know, kind of focus our first 2 meetings, maybe split it up to do 2 topics one day, 3 topics the next day, or the next meeting, and then post those foundational pieces of information on the website, and then start inviting the public to make comments, ask questions once they've reviewed those. And then we could use the back half of maybe March, April, May to, you know, tackle 1 or 2 topics again based on the public's comments, and maybe pull in experts for answering the specific questions that we don't know or we would not be able to answer.
Does that sound okay to everybody? I just want to be sure the public knows about the website. And yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm worried about. And well, anyway, I just want to be sure they know it's there, because if not, it's going to be a worthless sample. It'll be somebody like me answering it. So.
Right. And we're planning, I think, you know, Rachel and I will convey to the steering group about, you know, We're going to have newsletters, particularly for the commission, but it may be helpful for public newsletters that people could subscribe to, or we target journalists, reporters, with kind of monthly or bi-monthly updates as to what the commission is doing, and then making the pitch for public engagement and giving us some feedback on things.
Okay.
I think that's everything. Does anybody have any general questions about what you've heard so far?
I do have just a very, very general question. Was the idea for putting the whole commission together based on just that the public needs correct information, or is there a need for reform in certain areas, or to address deficiencies in the overall system, or just to build trust, or what was kind of the whole idea behind this?
In a nutshell, all of the above. If I can use a multiple choice answer for what you posed. I think a lot of this came out of the town halls that were done in 2022, that again was sponsored by the Carter Center.
Okay.
Jennifer and Bob organized and helped to lead. We discovered that during those town hall meetings, people would ask really great basic questions. And what we found was, once they had an outlet and could hear from bipartisan members of County Board of Elections, the election directors for counties, they would walk away and say, okay, I have a better understanding and I'm not as concerned as I was before coming into this. So I think with the belief of ensuring that we have fair, safe, and secure elections, all of those things that you mentioned, public knowledge, public understanding, possibly looking at issues and saying, is this really a good fit for what we do in terms of election administration here in North Carolina? Or are there other possibilities to perhaps consider as well? I think all of those are on the agenda for this particular commission. And I have to kind of reiterate, what we talked about at the initial meeting in October. This is very organic. We are building this as we move along. And I think anything that y'all want to contribute or that y'all think is important for us to deal with, there are no rules or regulations that are binding us to only these topics. We have the flexibility as an organic grassroots organization to include in things that we, the steering committee, didn't think about, but are important to address.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And with that, we're at 1 o'clock. So as I tell students, we'll be done when we're done, and we are done.
Okay.
So
Everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.
I hope everybody has good holidays as well, and we'll be in touch as follow-ups.
Great.
Likewise.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye-bye.